Hi everybody, it's Chris and welcome back to another video. Now before we get started, I just want to say a really big thank you to everyone who subscribes on this channel. I just noticed I've gone over 900 subscribers and that's just amazing. So thank you very much for everyone who does subscribe and everyone who comments as well. And if you don't subscribe and you like the content, then click on subscribe, more the merrier. Okay, I've got a bunch of stuff to show you today, stuff that I've picked up over the last 5 or 6 weeks. I've got one CD, a couple of 45s, 12-inch single, and about 8-9 albums. Now the first album I've been aware of for a very long time because I remember buying the single of this album back in 1981. I went on holiday to see some relatives near San Francisco in 1981, and really big in the charts at that time was a duet between Stevie Nicks and Tom Petty called Stop Dragging My Heart Around, and that features on this album. Now, I only bought this the other day and I've only played it once through, but I really like it actually. So I love that single, Stop Dragging My Heart Around. It's kind of a real swaggering kind of number, I love it. Edge of 17, which shows a kind of a slightly rockier side to Stevie Nicks. And it's interesting, this has got her normal kind of ballad stuff as well on it, but her voice sounds different than it does on Rumours or on Tusk. It's a little bit grittier and maybe better for it. Incredibly distinctive vocals she has. She has a very distinctive talking voice as well, and also her singing voice is very distinctive, I think. And I'm just on one run through really enjoying that album. So that's Belladonna by Stevie Nicks from '81. Now next up is an album that was, I think, a recommendation on my last video actually, which was side-long songs, so songs that lasted one side of a record. And one of the bands that I showed was Grateful Dead and their track Dark Star from Live Dead. And there was other recommendations about the sorts of things I should listen to by Grateful Dead, and one of them I discovered almost the following day and in a local shop, and that's this one. This is Europe 72, triple live album. The cover is a little bit knackered, and the records are a little bit scratchy, a little bit, not bad actually, just a little bit, and there's no booklet in it. But this was £6, so you can't complain. Triple album for £6. I'm really enjoying this album actually, really enjoying it. I'm not very familiar with Grateful Dead. I've got one or two of their things, and if I'm honest, I don't play them very often, and I might do a little bit more. Cumberland Blues I really like. As I said, I've not played this very much actually, 2 or 3 times maximum I should think. Really like Truckin', and I especially like Morning Dew. I think that's great. So that's Europe 72. Grateful Dead, triple live album, great stuff. Okay, 12-inch single. I don't know if this was released in the UK as a 12-inch. It was in France, and that's this. This is Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll by Ian Dury. Now, this has also got Sweet Gene Vincent and You're More Than Fair. I love Sweet Gene Vincent, and You're More Than Fair, I think, is a Kilburn and the High Roads track, and it's just hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Ian Dury has that knack of writing lyrics that are just so amusing, and that's no exception. So from 1977 on Stiff Records, a French version of Sex and Drugs and Rock and Roll, which is a classic of the era, I think. Now the next up is a band whose bassist and singer had been in a couple of punk bands prior to this band. This particular fella had been in the Saints and had been on their album Eternally Yours. I don't know if he was on Prehistoric Sounds by the Saints. I don't know if he was on that third album. He was certainly on Eternally Yours, and then he went to play in The Damned, and I think it was on Machine Gun Etiquette he played, the album with Love Song and Smash It Up. The bassist and vocalist is Algie Ward, and this is the band he went on to form with a couple of brothers, a 3-piece called Tank. Now this is often seen as one of the sort of classics of the new wave of British heavy metal, and it passed me by at the time because around about 81 I kind of started to lose a little bit of interest in this particular movement, and 82 I'd kind of moved on pretty much, I think. And so this did pass me by, and it's not quintessential for me, new wave of British heavy metal. It's certainly got a title that's very quintessential. New wave of British heavy metal. It's a very, very loud 3-piece. Now, this was a band that toured with Motorhead, and obviously were hugely influenced by Motorhead. This album was also produced by Fast Eddie Clarke, and there's certainly got a lot of Motorhead about it. The pace on this album, with the exception of 1 or 2 tracks, is quite high, and it's I quite enjoyed listening to it actually, but it's kind of one or two songs at a time kind of album. You know, if you listen to the whole album, one after the other, I think the paint on your walls would probably start peeling. It's really, it's quite an aggressive album, but it wasn't very expensive actually. It was only in fact £4, so I was quite happy to add that to my new wave of British heavy metal. The next up, I quite like some of this person's stuff, and I was really disappointed with this album actually. It's on Verve Records, and the singer is Astrid Gilberto. Now, I've got a couple of things by her, and when she's kind of at her Brazilian samba best, she's really good, I think. It's gentle and it just flows over you. It's wonderful stuff. But it's consistent. It's consistent in that the songs all sound the same, and I'm not that bothered by it. It's an album that I think I'll probably move on fairly quickly. This is Beach Sambo. It's from 1968 on Verve Records. Astrid Gilberto. It's okay. The last song, which is in Portuguese, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, is okay. And the first song, Stay, is all right. And that opens with Stay and Let's Make Sex with Music. You know, okay, that's a fair invitation. But the rest is kind of, you know, a lot of it is sung in English, and I think it'd be better if it was sung in Portuguese. It's just a bit kind of bland and faceless, actually. So it's not an album I'm going to listen to, and it's probably not an album I'm going to keep. Next up, I'm really pleased to get these two. I'm a big fan of this particular band and the lead guy in it. So the lead person in it, who does the vocals and the guitar, is a Canadian fella from Montreal called Frank Marino, and his band called Mahogany Rush. And I've got pretty much all of the vinyl era stuff from Mahogany Rush, bar these two albums. So I was really pleased to pick up his debut, Maxoon, from 1970. I think it came out in 73. This might be a 74 copy, or it came out in 72. And this is a 73 copy. I can't remember which way round. He was only about 17 when he recorded this, you know. And when you think about that kind of, you know, level of musicianship at that age, it's just incredible. This, you know, Frank Marino was often derided as being a kind of Jimi Hendrix copyist. And I kind of get that to a point, but I think he's more of a disciple than a copyist, because he has his own style. Sure, on here we've got that psychedelic guitar, we've got those spoken vocals that Hendrix kind of did as well, and we've got that kind of psychedelic production. But he certainly is his own man, and this, although it's a fairly like a band in its infancy, there's some fantastic moments on here actually. You know, Buddy, which is very much like a kind of Little Wing kind of thing, I think. Funky Woman, Madness, All in Your Mind is great. And I love the track Blues as well, really good. So again, not had it very long, still listening to it, still getting used to it. I know his later stuff much, much more because I kind of grew up with that. So this is less familiar from the early days. The other Mahogany Rush album I got, which is his third album, I think, and this is a much more kind of fully formed Mahogany Rush album actually. It's Strange Universe. So this came out on 20th Century Records in 1975. This is a US copy of it, and this is really good as well. There's an instrumental Strange Universe, the title track, which kind of leans towards the kind of sound that he had on later albums, very psychedelic. It's, you know, the guitar work is kind of real incendiary stuff. It's great, but there's some really good songs on there, and again, not had it very long, so just getting kind of used to it. So I can't necessarily recommend here's a great song, here's a great one, but certainly side one I'm really enjoying it. So there we are, Strange Universe by Frank Marino and Mahogany Rush, and I might do a little sort of video just on him actually, because I really like his stuff. Next up, this was a charity shop, the only charity shop find of the whole haul actually, so this was only £1. And I've got a couple of albums. Well, I've got the debut album and I've got their second album, which is their most revered album, their lauded album, if you like, and that's called Rio. The band is Duran Duran, and this is their third album. This is 83 possibly, I think. This is Seven and the Ragged Tiger. That's a pretentious title, isn't it? And including a really kind of pretentious picture as well. This was a band who were certainly at the height, I think, of their successes coming into this time. I think there's a couple of #1 singles off this. Reflex, New Movement on Monday. Union of the Snake. I think those three did really well. For me, just on listening through this, they're the highlights of the album. Reflex is a slightly different version, I think, to the one that I've heard on single. It's a little bit less polished on here, but not bad. New Moon on Monday is actually a really good song. It's nowhere near as good as Rio. It's kind of a move towards a more kind of possibly more dancey sound than synth pop and new romantic kind of sound, but it's not bad. And a separate quid, can't go wrong, can you? Next up is an absolute classic, I think. This is a classic debut. And I've been wanting to get this into my collection for ages, and I've never really seen it at a decent price, and I did find it at a decent price and snapped it up. This is the debut album from British blues rock band, or certainly were when they first brought this out. Free, from 1969, I think this came out, early 69. This predates the first album from Led Zeppelin, and it features a cover called The Hunter, which actually did feature in a cameo version on the first Led Zeppelin album, I think in how many more times. The version of The Hunter on here is just brilliant. It's a little bit slower than the live versions of it, but it's just wonderful. I think this album is great. I actually think this possibly could be my favourite Free album, actually. It might eclipse Fire and Water. The track Worry is quite a sort of heavy song. This is probably the heaviest album, actually. Walk in My Shadow, love that song. Wild Indian Woman, not so much. Going Down Slow, really good blues stuff. I mean, this is a band who were under 18, I think, at the time. I think Paul Kossoff, the guitarist, was only 18. Andy Fraser, the bassist, who plays the most fluid bass lines. It's just amazing musician. He was only 17. Paul Rodgers on here has got a voice that is like a seasoned blues pro. Clearly influenced by things like Otis Redding, but absolutely amazing vocalist. And the drummer as well, really solid beat to this album. So I'm a Mover is great, Moonshine, I love that. The Hunter, wow, love it. So there's tons of Sobs, the debut album by Free. Couple of 45s actually, both from 77. First one's on NEMS Records. This is The Boys. I think this is their second single actually, first time. Absolute classic. It's just a brilliant single. So delighted to get that into the collection. The other one is a rarity apparently, but it's an interesting song. I think it's one of the first punk bands to use synthesizers and a drum machine. They're a French band, and they're called Metal Urbane, and this is Paris Maquis, which is apparently quite collectible. It's not that great, it's on rough trade, but again, we're really pleased to add that into the collection. And last two both have a kind of a link. Now, usually on my videos, I share a Deep Purple kind of connection, and this album has a Deep Purple connection. And it's not my usual kind of album. This is Adam Faith. It's almost like his comeback album from 1974, I think, so 50 years old. This is I Survive. And the reason I got this, and again, it was only cheap, it was only £1, is that the opening song on here is called I Survived. Now, that was the single off the album, but the single is edited, and the album version is very different. This is an album produced by Martin Birch in 1974, who also, in the same year, produced Stormbringer by Deep Purple. And right at the start of the song, I Survived, is this kind of amazing guitar solo from Richie Blackmore. It's really, really bizarre that that's right at the start. It's incongruous with the rest of the album, but really interesting. And linked to that is my last thing to show, and that's this CD, Get Ready by Richie Blackmore. This is a collection, this is from early 2000s actually, double CD, a collection of all his session stuff that he did. So he played obviously with the Outlaws, he's in Hines, Gene Vincent, Glenda Collins. He played with the Rally Rounders, the Sessions, the Lancasters, Screaming Lord Sutch. Just a really good insight into the background of Richie Blackmore prior to his time in Deep Purple. Obviously a musician that really did the rounds prior to coming really big in that particular band. So there you go. There's the stuff that I've picked up. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and I'll be back sometime soon with another video. Cheers.